and perhaps we'll get everybody to just introduce themselves quickly. Marilyn, thank you so much for taking the time to do this with us today. I'm really anxious for people to be able to communicate directly with you. So I'll just say that you are an experienced online teacher and course developer, and you have a wisdom that exceeds most of us. So we're really looking forward to hear from you.
Wow, thank you.
Maybe we could just, Bienvenido, start with you, then John, then Rhonda, and if you could just introduce yourselves briefly.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I'm Bienvenido Isla. You can call me Benny for short. I'm the professor for Center for Business, and I primarily teach taxation and financial accounting.
Thanks, Bien.
That's all for me.
John, you can just post your little introduction in text. John doesn't have his mic today. Welcome, John. Rhonda, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rhonda, and I teach for the Center of Business. And I teach communications, business communications as well.
Welcome, Rhonda. Okay, Marilyn, let's give it over to you.
So hi everyone. This is really interesting. I'm intrigued to hear about what you're doing, John. Digital marketing. Wow, that's fascinating. Bienvenido. I think we met at a workshop back in the winter. And Rhonda, I don't think we've met. Yes, hi. And Rhonda, hi to you too.
Hi, Marilyn.
So, is it appropriate for me to ask what questions you have? I'm prepared to answer any questions, any and all questions, if you have questions.
Great. Why don't we start there, Marilyn, and then maybe you could fill in some of the other important pieces of information that you think would be helpful to them. So, the rest of you, fire away with your questions.
Hi, Marilyn. I was just wondering what aspects of technology you use when you're teaching, because we've learned about so many, Twitter, Facebook, Audacity. I'm just wondering what you think are the crucial ones when you're teaching online.
Wow, that's a big question and a great question. And I'll preface it by saying that I have one course that I teach, one section online, which is very different from the other two sections, which are live, but it is the same course with the same outcomes. So the technology that I'm using in that course, I use both in the live/blended version as well as my fully online version. And I would say that what I'm relying on the most is, let me think. I use Blogger, and I've used Tumblr. I know that's outside of the Blackboard blog application, but that's a really popular technology in that course. I use Stumble and Delicious to have students build resource collections. I will be using Twitter this fall. I haven't used it yet. And I'll be using that in both the live and online sections. And I've also, again, this is outside of Blackboard, but I've been using Google Sites as a way of getting students to work on documents collaboratively. You may have been learning about how to do that in Blackboard. I haven't done it yet. So if you're preparing to do that, you're ahead of me. I've been using Google Docs and Google Sites for that. Those are my sort of go-to technologies at the moment.
Thanks a lot, Marilyn. That's helpful.
Good.
Marilyn, it's Bienvenido. I'd like to find out, like, if at this point you are already using online testing in your online course.
So I will be really upfront and say that the courses that I teach in tend to lean very heavily on critical thinking skills, and there's not very much testing in them. I do have one quiz that I administer. It's worth 15% of the course grade, and it's in my Gen Ed online course. And so yes, I mean, I certainly have had experience with that one quiz. Over a number of years, I've done that quiz online. That's really my only online testing experience. Do you have questions about how online testing works?
Well, I'm trying to work on that segment because like there's a difference in, I guess, the courses that we are teaching. Like I'm more focused on business courses, especially, you know, in accounting and taxation. You know, the quizzes, exams, and exercises, they're kind of cut and dry. And it will be helpful if they have a means to supplement their readings by doing sample tests online. So I'm in the middle of that, and I'm working on it. So hopefully when I start my courses, I'll be able to exemplify that and show one at least for each course. And then the reason why I asked that is I want to have a predetermined reaction or viewpoint or perhaps perception from students on their learning experiences and their interaction and actually, you know, their actual performance on online teaching and learning. But I guess that's yet to be seen, and we'll see if I can develop or put up that aspect. Because right now my struggle is essentially getting the right format of the exam questions and solutions that I can upload to Blackboard and do the testing so that I can launch it and actually do the testing myself to see if it works. So that's about what you know, my initiative in terms of improving my teaching and collaboration with my students, at least implementing this aspect of online teaching.
Okay, I can comment. Actually, I think I can comment. I do have a little more to say. I have and do use self-testing quizzes as a way for students to check comprehension. And it sounds like you're saying that, my understanding is you're saying that that would be at least part of your purpose for creating quizzes or tests would be not for grades, but as a way for students to check comprehension. Am I right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's because I'm trying to get an alternative way to kind of indoctrinate the students that reading is very important in order to acquire the knowledge. You know, like we talk about peer review, but I always believe there's the downloading of knowledge that is required in the interaction between professors, instructors, and students. And that's one way of flashing out to or a substitute of the reading material onto the students, and then give them some insight of how interesting it would be if they will only go through the context of the material.
Okay, so I'm just gonna comment a little bit more. So definitely in my fully online courses, I have used some self-test self-test features as a way for students to check their comprehension level understanding of what they're reading. I tend to do that fairly early in the course when we're working at a sort of comprehension level of mastering the material. One of my preferred ways to get students to sort of check their comprehension of material is to have them discuss what they've been reading. So I find that that's one of the values of the discussion board is to take a topic out of the readings and then have the students discuss it while requiring them to make references to the readings in their discussion.
Very good. Thank you very much. And it's nice to know that we could collaborate in my needs of getting to the mainstream of what I'm working on. I expect that I will connect with you somehow to for you to share with me your expertise on that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would also say that in Blackboard, I've noticed, I mean, the quiz feature, or test feature, I forget if we call it quiz or test. Anyway, that feature allows us many different ways of asking questions. For me, it works much better than than WebCT did. So I like that feature. What I would add, I'm going to admit something here. I have struggled with figuring out how to get the survey function to work. So I've had trouble figuring out a way to create tests or quizzes that are simply self-testing and that students that aren't counted as grades. So I'm just going to admit that right up front, Shirley. I haven't quite mastered that. So that's probably something I should check in with you about.
Excuse me, Marilyn. I wonder if you could respond. John is not able to talk, but he's asked a question in the chat. Could you just take a few seconds to read his question regarding discussions and perhaps respond to that?
Definitely. Yep. I'm just reading it now. Okay, so this is a great question. The first, and I'll kind of break down my response into a few different points. John, in terms of your point that the range and quality of writers across 30 to 40 students is an issue. I completely agree with you. And in my online Gen Ed course, I range from having students who have university degrees. I've had students who had master's degrees, all the way to having students who really struggle with putting full sentences together. And so some of what I think about when I'm moderating the discussion board is that students in a live classroom have huge challenges in terms of how they communicate orally. When I look at my live students, I have students who are so comfortable talking live in class they could go on forever if I wasn't moderating them. And then I have other students who have real challenges with oral communication. So I don't expect the level of mastery of English, written English, to be the same for all students. I just assume that, yeah, there are going to be some real differences in how people communicate in writing, and that's part of our work is to try to understand what people are saying. In the same way that in a live classroom, sometimes we have to work to understand what people are saying when they speak. So sometimes my job is to help clarify what a student is saying, or to do a little bit of paraphrasing to make sure I'm actually getting at what they're trying to say. The next point I would say, time-consuming and frustrating for the graders. Yes. Yes. I mean, for me, that's actually why I try to make it a significant portion of the grade. In actually both of the online courses I'm teaching, it's worth 25% of the grade. That's participation on the discussion boards. And there's a very specific rubric. What they're expected to contribute is very specific. I try to make it very clear what tasks they need to complete in order to earn those marks. But I think if I'm going to have to spend time on this board and I'm expecting them to treat it seriously, then it does need to be with a significant amount of their marks. And yeah, it's time consuming. It is. I would also say that for me, it has been profoundly rewarding. Some of the best discussions that I have ever had with students have happened online. In fact, I would say that when it really works, the discussion board is my preferred place for really deep level discussion of course material. So yeah, when it works, it's profoundly rewarding. And yeah, lots of times it's frustrating. Sorry, I've been talking for a long time. I just want to answer the last part of your, how much do I emphasize? What is the maximum of a percentage of a total grade? Yeah, there you go. The most I've ever had it worth is 25%. Okay, I hope I've answered your questions. I know I talked for quite a while there.
Marilyn, your points are very helpful. I'm getting the sense that the online teaching is more labor intensive, and I'm wondering what you can suggest to get around some of those issues.
So I would agree with you that it's more labor intensive. Yes, I would agree. And I think I've been having this discussion with my colleagues. How do we cut back on the amount of time? I don't have any simple tips for you on this. I'm going to quote Stella Bestone, who this is my favorite quote. I've been repeating it to everyone for months. And what she said the other day, or a couple of months ago to me, was, poor design creates administrative load. So in other words, the more poorly designed a course is, the more work, the more repetitive, unnecessary work it creates for the instructor. So I'm kind of trying to tackle this at a design level. I think we're in the infancy of online teaching and learning. I mean, people have been teaching in live classrooms for thousands of years. We've only been teaching online for, well, for me, for 10. We're really new at this, and I think I'm just, the best thing I can say is that I'm struggling really hard to figure out how to do better course design so that I can spend the most time communicating with students constructively and the least amount of time answering the same question over and over again. The kind of thing that is just really frustrating for all of us. So maybe it is not the most, it's not a really concrete answer, but it's my best answer.
Sorry. That's very helpful, Marilyn. I'm getting a bit of an echo here because I'm in the same room as Shirley. I'm just wondering how many workshops it took you before you felt fully ready to jump on board. We're in the final week of our workshop session, and I'm still feeling a little shaky. Did it take you more than one round? I've heard a lot of teachers say that they've repeated the whole session another time.
So I admit I'm a bit of a dinosaur, so I learned to do online teaching and learning when it was really in its first years of happening at the college. I will say that most of my learning happened while I was actually teaching. I felt very well prepared by Shirley and Chili. I mean, they were amazing in terms of the support they gave me, and they really set me up in terms of having a framework for how to think about what I was doing. I had a very good pedagogical understanding of why online teaching made sense. That was really important for me. I needed to know that I was doing this not just, I don't know, because of some idea that it might save money, which apparently is not true. But what I'm trying to say is I needed to know I was doing this not because I was being forced into it, but because there were good pedagogical reasons for students to do online teaching and learning. So I felt confident about that. I had, I'd done probably, I guess, pretty much the same kind of training that you all have done. I will also say that I designed the course that I was teaching with the support of Shirley and Chili, so that helped. I knew the course inside out because I'd been part of creating it. So I think knowing your course inside out is really important. And then the actual sort of jumping off the cliff and teaching online was really, I just was on a really steep learning curve for the first 14 weeks, for the first time I taught that course. I was very upfront with students when I was doing something new, when I was, I might say to them, I'm going to try this out, we'll see how it goes, and that actually worked okay. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Yes, it does. I really appreciate the honesty, and I have to agree. Shirley's been amazing with the teaching of the workshops, and it just seems like there's so much to incorporate. And that's what brings me back to my first question around what aspects you use. That seems as though we don't need to use every single one.
Yes, and I would actually encourage you to keep it relatively simple, especially your first time. So my very first time, really, I relied heavily on the discussion board. I was teaching a course where there was a lot of really exciting material that existed in the form of websites. I was teaching a course related to kids and violence, so I could send them to the United Nations website, UNICEF website. I think that's, I'm not sure if that's true for all of you or not. I'm not sure if there's exciting online content that you could be using to get students to think about what they're learning. If there's a way for you to incorporate material that they can get on the internet, while thinking critically, obviously. We always want them to think critically about what they're looking at on the internet. But if there's a way for you to do things you couldn't do in a live classroom, to have them explore material on the internet, I would really encourage you to do that. But yeah, discussion board, use of the internet where it's appropriate. I think incorporating Twitter to me is fairly exciting. I can see a lot of pedagogical reasons to do it. But yeah, I would say keep it simple. Yeah.
Thanks.
Marilyn, one quick question. From your online teaching experience to date, would you be able to share with us how you have dealt or have done modification somehow in handling diverse student learners, meaning the level of difficulty or modification to make on your teaching material, or if you have double standard or multiple standards on learning materials, and the basis for assessment?
Okay, so that's a great question. One of my biggest pieces of learning has been to provide a few different ways for students to get to the outcomes that are required. So, my understanding of the fact that students learn differently and are diverse, not only sort of, culturally and sociologically, but also just diverse in terms of how they learn, what they like, their preferences. The more that I've been able to provide a few different paths to get to the same outcome, the more I do that. In the short term, it creates more work, but in the long term, it actually, for me, saves time and works better. I don't know in business whether you have those kind of options. I mean, one of the things I'm doing now is I'll provide a podcast, a video resource, and a text resource often for really critical materials. I realize in business that probably isn't an option for you. However, mixing it up in terms of using audio, visual materials, and text has been really important for me. I think that online, in some ways, online provides options in terms of participation. To be perfectly honest with you, I'm a teacher who's done a lot of anti-racist education and work, and one of the things I notice is that the students who tend to feel most comfortable in the live classroom tend to be English-speaking, Canadian-born, all those other things. And I find that when we get online, that gets shaken up a little bit. It tends to look a little different in terms of who feels comfortable participating on the discussion board, for example. So I like that. Okay, I think I'm rambling now. Is there anything else you need me to say?
No, that's very good. I'm just trying to make a comparison because in reality, in class teaching, we know we deal with different levels of diversity, and specifically on some linguistic diversity, but we know how to alleviate that, and we can see because we have interaction one-on-one or group in one. But because of the absence of that physical interaction on online learning, we just have to use our perception, not even looking at the listing of students. We can appreciate and we can gauge the level of diversity. And in as much as we don't really do a lot or significant variations from the course outlines and our approach to teaching, we just have to manage on a situational basis, like especially I'm talking about English as a second language. There's a separate way of treating separate group like that, notwithstanding like their ability to learn, and in fact, in my experience, those are the students who actually excel and do well in class, except that they're lacking effective communication. So we know how to handle that part, but I think it's more on the perception in the viewpoint of the students. If they know that they belong to a diverse group, they might have a perception that they are short-handed in terms of what is provided for.
Yes.
Thanks, Benny. Yes.
Thanks, Benny. Yes, you just inspired me to make a couple of really quick comments. One is that I think indicating to students that we not only accept diversity, but we value it, we celebrate it. I think that's possible to do right at the beginning of the course. I know you know this. Yeah, I'm sure you're doing it already. Acknowledging when students are introducing themselves in the very first module. I like to summarize the diversity among the student group. I like to talk about how important that is to their learning. I also try to make it clear to students very early on that on the discussion board, I'm not marking them for grammar. The same way that when they speak in class, I don't assess their grammar or their use of English. I want them to communicate, but the discussion board is not the place where I am concerned about about the grammar and sentence structure and the kinds of things that I look for in their written papers. And I think a lot of instructors have trouble with that. But again, my comparison is simply, I don't grade students on their use of spoken English in the classroom. I want them to communicate. The same thing is true on the discussion board.
That's an excellent elaboration. Thank you very much.
Marilyn, could I ask a quick question? I just posted it in the chat. Could you tell us maybe what was the worst thing that occurred for you when teaching online?
Sorry, you want me to answer this?
Sorry, you want me to answer this in speaking? Yes, Shirley?
Or do you want me to write my answer?
Or do you want me to write my answer?
No, I was hoping you would just speak your answer.
Okay, sure.
Okay, I
admit I struggle a bit with the back and forth of spoken and written. There we go. Okay, so I'm talking. The worst thing was the WebCT crash, but we probably don't need to go into that. I think probably the most frustrating experiences have been related to issues with technology. But I'm guessing that's not what you're asking me to talk about. The worst thing that ever happened.
If it is the technology, I would encourage you to talk about that and share your experience, because somebody did ask that in a group I was with, asked what happens if everything crashes. So you did have to face that situation.
Yes.
And I think, what I would say is that when the technology messes up, especially when I first started teaching, actually in my first several years of teaching online, I found that I would feel ashamed and embarrassed when the technology screwed up. And I'd get nauseous going onto the computer. I mean, I was just talking about this with one of my colleagues. The thing about teaching online for me is that my computer lives in my house. It's in my study. I can't walk out of my bedroom without walking past that computer. And I found during the period of time when the technology was really acting up or was crashing, that just walking past the computer, I would just feel I had a big emotional reaction. And I think I would just encourage all of you, when you're struggling with technology, to remember that you're not the technology. And
it's difficult.
It's difficult. I mean, if there was a problem with the physical plant, if the college couldn't be open for some reason, and students couldn't get into the college, we wouldn't feel, we'd feel badly, but we wouldn't feel embarrassed. We wouldn't feel like it was our fault as educators. I would encourage you to try to make those same distinctions. When the technology is not working, it isn't your personal fault. And students will get angry and upset with you. You're the easiest, you're the first place for them to go to, but that doesn't mean that it's your fault. And I think it's important to empathize with students when there's technological struggles. We can let them know, yeah, it's frustrating, yeah, sorry that this is difficult. At the same time, it's not personal to us. And that was a really important thing for me to kind of get my head around, especially when we had an extended problem with the WebCT platform. And also the piece about how the technology lives in your house, I think for me was also very important to get my head around. I needed to remember that just because I teach online in my home, sometimes sitting on my front porch with my laptop, it doesn't mean that the whole classroom lives inside of my house. Sometimes it feels like that. Sometimes it feels like the whole class is in my house. But I've had to think carefully about trying to, all the sort of self-care things, trying to remember that the students are not literally in my study, if that makes sense.
What a good point
that is, Marilyn.
That's really helpful.
That's really helpful, Marilyn. Thank you. I really do appreciate your honesty and can really sort of commiserate with the idea of the computer making me not feel well. I have chapters due right now for my second edition of my book, and I feel like I'm really avoiding the computer, and it doesn't represent a very fun thing for me. One of the questions I have for you, though, is when it comes to online versus classroom teaching, is there any one thing you can pin down to something being lost when you're online that you've noticed in comparison to the classroom?
I
would say there are definitely things that are lost, and there are definitely things that are added. In terms of the major things that I noticed that are lost, one is the sense of informality. So students in my live classes will all, they'll come flooding up to me at the end of class to ask questions about assignments that they're struggling with. They'll follow me to the washroom on the way, sometimes on breaks or whatever, to ask me questions. I mean, there are many ways for them to have informal chat with me. I find it harder to create that online. I have tried experiments with online office hours in the past. I found that students weren't particularly interested in coming in for a separate online office hour. Now what I'm thinking I'm going to try next term is in week number 1 or 2, having an online office hour that they get. Somehow I'll give them marks for coming in. And then in week 7 or 8, I'm going to have another online office hour where we do an evaluation of how things are going, how their learning is going, and again, they'll get marks for that. So my hope is that, that they might feel like they can have a little more informal conversation with me in that way. So I would say that's the major thing, is the opportunity for informal, just informal chat.
Thanks.
Thanks. And you said there's something that's added?
Oh, so many things that are added. For me, one of the major
for me, one of the
things
major
I find
things is that I find that students, and because I have the opportunity to see students who I've taught live in a fully online course, so I know them live in the classroom and I know what they're like online. So I get to see the differences, and there are students who would not talk in a live classroom who engage so much more fully online. I really like the possibilities that are created for participation in online learning. That's for me one of the major reasons to do it. I also love the fact that students can, it's much easier for them to go back over the materials, to review. I mean, I know we can share PowerPoints with students in a live classroom, but really, you know, for a lot of students, they're not fully present always in the live classroom, and they can't, you know, they can't rerun what happened. I mean, they can in their mind, but, you know, I think often when they rerun what they think I've said, it may not be the same as what I've said. Whereas online, you know, they just have to look, and they can look at the discussion and they can see.
Great, thanks so much.
That's great. Thanks so much.
Does anybody have any sort of final questions they'd like to ask? I know we're taking up, it's almost an hour here, Marilyn, so I'm wondering if we should just get the last questions in, and then we'll say thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
Well, it doesn't look like there's any
Well,
more
it doesn't look like there's any more questions. So what I would like to say, Marilyn, is thank you just so much for taking the time to speak with us. I think everybody will find this very helpful. I certainly found it very helpful, and I so much appreciate this opportunity to speak with you. So thank you again.
Thanks all of you. I love talking about teaching and learning. It's one of my, you know, the best things about our job is when we get to talk about it. So thank you. I appreciate it. I love that applause thing. That's great. I didn't see that before. Thank you.